November 7th, 1943. Dawn breaks over Bougainville's Hill 700. A sergeant from Company E, 2nd Battalion, 145th Infantry, crouches in a pillbox barely larger than a bathtub. Through the firing slit, he watches Japanese soldiers cutting through the last strand of double apron wire protecting his position. They've already breached 3 barriers. Now they're placing a Bangalore torpedo beneath the 4th. The sergeant's hands find the weapon beside him. 20 pounds of walnut and steel. The M1918A2 Browning automatic rifle. He knows what's about to happen. He's done this before. The Japanese will rush through the breach. They'll come with bayonets fixed, screaming, believing their spirit will overcome American firepower. They always believe this. They're always wrong. The torpedo detonates. The wire snaps and curls. 8 Japanese soldiers surge forward. The sergeant opens fire. The bar's cyclic rate is 550 rounds per minute. In the 3 seconds it takes those men to cross 15 feet of wire, the weapon fires 27 rounds. 8 men fall, 8 men hang in the wire like broken marionettes. The sound echoes across the hill. It always does. It's the sound Japanese soldiers learned to fear more than anything else in the Pacific War. It's the sound that told them they were about to die. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. But this story doesn't begin on Bougainville. It begins 2 years earlier, in the briefing rooms of the Imperial Japanese Army, where officers prepared their men for war against America. The training was specific. The doctrine was clear. Spirit would overcome material. The way of the warrior would defeat the way of the machine. Japanese infantry tactics, refined over decades of fighting in China and Manchuria, emphasized close combat, night attacks, and the decisive charge with fixed bayonets. The 1929 Field Manual was explicit. Spiritual power and the bayonet was supreme. Firepower was secondary. This wasn't mysticism. It was tactical calculation born from necessity. Japan's industrial capacity couldn't match America's. Everyone in the high command knew this. So they built doctrine around what Japan had in abundance: disciplined soldiers willing to die without hesitation. If American machine guns could fire 600 rounds per minute, Japanese infantry would attack at night when machine guns couldn't see. If American artillery dominated daylight, Japanese forces would infiltrate silently and kill with blades. For years, this doctrine worked. In China, Japanese forces consistently defeated armies that outnumbered them. At Port Arthur, in the Russo-Japanese War, spiritual power and courage had stormed fortifications that should have been impregnable. The bayonet charge became Japan's signature tactic, not because it was glorious, but because it worked. Against enemies with limited automatic weapons, against forces not trained for close combat, against opponents who broke when Japanese soldiers appeared from nowhere screaming in the dark, it worked spectacularly. Then came December 1941. Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, Wake Island, Guam, Singapore, Hong Kong. The Japanese military machine rolled forward with such speed and violence that American intelligence struggled to comprehend it. Japanese soldiers seemed superhuman. They infiltrated through impossible terrain. They fought without fear. They accepted death as routine. Early American reports described them as fanatics, but that wasn't quite accurate. They were professionals executing doctrine that matched their resources to their enemy's weaknesses. But there was a problem. The doctrine was built for fighting Chinese and British Empire forces. It assumed enemies with limited automatic weapons at the squad level. It assumed opponents whose infantry carried bolt-action rifles almost exclusively. It assumed facing armies where machine guns were heavy, crew-served weapons positioned at company or battalion level, not distributed down to individual fire teams. The Imperial Japanese Army entered the Pacific War with the Type 99 light machine gun as their squad-level automatic weapon, effective weapon, 7.7mm, 30-round magazine. Rate of fire, 800 rounds per minute in optimal conditions. Each Japanese infantry battalion had perhaps 9 of these weapons distributed across its companies. That was standard for the era. Most armies structured automatic weapons similarly, but America didn't. America had the Browning automatic rifle, and America gave them to squads, multiple per platoon. By 1943, the M1918A2 bar was officially designated an automatic rifle, not a machine gun. This distinction mattered on paper. It didn't matter in combat. What mattered was this: an American infantry squad had more automatic firepower than many Japanese infantry platoons. The standard Marine rifle squad by 1943 consisted of 13 men, 3 fire teams of 4 men each, plus a squad leader. Each fire team had 1 bar gunner, 3 bars per squad. Each bar fired the .30-06 Springfield cartridge, full power rifle round. The cyclic rate on the fast setting was 550 rounds per minute, on the slow setting 350. Both settings were fully automatic. No semi-automatic option on the M1919A2 variant. The weapons specifications were straightforward. Overall length, 47 inches. Weight, 19.4 pounds unloaded. Magazine capacity, 20 rounds. Effective range, 600 yards. Maximum range, 3,500 yards. Muzzle velocity, 2,800 feet per second. The round it fired could penetrate light armor at combat ranges. It could punch through palm logs. It could cut through jungle foliage. It could absolutely tear through human flesh. Japanese intelligence knew about the bar. They had captured examples early in the war. They had examined them. They understood the technical specifications. What they failed to understand was the tactical implications of distributing such weapons at the squad level. They failed to grasp what it meant when every American patrol had multiple bars. They failed to comprehend how fundamentally this changed infantry combat. The first real test came at Guadalcanal, August 21, 1942. Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki led 800 men of the 28th Infantry Regiment in a night attack on American positions guarding Henderson Field, the Battle of the Tenaru. Ichiki's plan followed doctrine perfectly. Night infiltration, silent approach, sudden assault. The psychological shock of Japanese soldiers appearing from darkness with fixed bayonets had shattered defenses before it should work again. His men crossed the Tenaru River in darkness. They advanced silently through the jungle. They reached the American perimeter. Then they charged, screaming, bayonets fixed, spirit over material, courage over firepower. The American defensive line erupted, not just with rifles, not just with machine guns, with bars, multiple bars per position. The sound was unlike anything Japanese soldiers had experienced before. It wasn't the methodical thump, thump, thump of heavy machine guns firing from fixed positions that could be spotted and flanked. It was everywhere, mobile, concentrated, overwhelming. The Marines at the Tenaru had learned something in their first weeks on Guadalcanal. They had learned that Japanese night attacks followed patterns: infiltration, sudden assault, close combat. So they prepared accordingly. They positioned bar gunners at intervals along the line. They stockpiled ammunition. They waited. When Ichiki's men charged, they died. Not in ones and twos, in groups. The bars fired long bursts, 20-round magazines emptied in 2 seconds on the fast cyclic rate. Assistant gunners slapped in fresh magazines. The firing never stopped. By dawn, 770 of Ichiki's 800 men were dead. The colonel committed suicide. American casualties, 35 killed. The disparity wasn't just numerical. It was philosophical. Japanese doctrine had encountered a problem it wasn't built to solve. American squads had more automatic firepower than Japanese planning accounted for. The bayonet charge couldn't close the distance when multiple automatic weapons covered every approach. But doctrine is hard to change. Doctrine is built on years of training, decades of institutional knowledge, centuries of cultural assumptions. The Imperial Japanese Army had fought and won wars using these tactics. Changing doctrine meant admitting those victories were circumstantial, that success came from fighting enemies with different capabilities, that the tactics themselves might be fundamentally flawed against a properly equipped opponent. So they didn't change. They doubled down. If the first attack failed, the second would succeed through greater courage. If the second failed, the third would triumph through superior spirit. The mathematics of firepower versus flesh became increasingly desperate. American firepower multiplied, Japanese casualties mounted, as if the gap widened. Probational officer Toshihiro Ura wrote in his diary near Munda Point in June 1943, "We are positively fighting to win, but we have no weapons. We stand with rifles and bayonets to meet the enemy's aircraft, battleships, and medium artillery." The Japanese army is still depending on the hand-to-hand fighting of the Meiji era, while the enemy is using highly developed scientific weapons. He understood. Many Japanese officers understood, but understanding didn't change the reality. Japan couldn't suddenly produce automatic weapons in American quantities. Japan couldn't redesign its infantry doctrine overnight. Japan couldn't admit to its soldiers that their spirit wasn't enough, that courage couldn't overcome firepower, that they were being sent to die in attacks that had no mathematical possibility of success. The BOR became the physical manifestation of this asymmetry. Japanese soldiers began to recognize its sound, the distinctive ripping noise of automatic fire at 550 rounds per minute, faster than their Type 99, lighter than American heavy machine guns, everywhere, ubiquitous, in every firefight, on every patrol, at every defensive position. The Marines used the bar in ways Japanese doctrine never anticipated. They positioned bar men at the front of patrols, first man in the column, not for reconnaissance, for firepower. In jungle warfare, the first contact is usually decisive. Whoever fires first with overwhelming force usually wins. A bar at the point of a patrol meant that first contact came with automatic fire, not single shots. It meant immediate suppression. It meant the Japanese patrol never got to close to bayonet range. They positioned bar men at the rear of patrols, last man in the column, for the same reason. Japanese infiltration tactics often involved trailing American patrols, then attacking from behind. A bar at the rear meant that attack was met with 550 rounds per minute at point-blank range. There was no getting close to American positions. The firepower met you at every distance. The weapon's weight was simultaneously its greatest weakness and its greatest strength. 20 pounds unloaded, 40 pounds with bipod and full load of ammunition. Bar gunners were supposed to be big men, strong men. The rumor that only tall Marines carried bars was false, but it persisted because the weapon was punishing. Carrying it on an island-hopping campaign in tropical heat was brutal. The average life expectancy of a bar gunner in combat was 30 minutes, but that 30 minutes changed. Battles. One man with a bar could put out more fire than 3 men with rifles. He could suppress an enemy position single-handedly. He could break up an attack before it formed. He could turn a defensive position into a killing zone. Marines who survived on Iwo Jima later said they only survived because of their bar gunner. When Japanese forces came out of caves in night attacks, when infiltrators appeared from nowhere, when sudden close combat erupted, the bar was the difference between living and dying. The weapon had limitations. The magazine held only 20 rounds. On the fast cyclic rate, that was 2.2 seconds of continuous fire. Reloading was awkward. The barrel couldn't be quickly changed. Extended firing caused overheating. Vision devices were poor. Accuracy in fully automatic mode was mediocre beyond 200 yards. None of it mattered. In the Pacific, most combat happened at ranges under 100 yards, often under 50. In jungle terrain with limited visibility, in cave systems and bunker complexes, on volcanic islands with twisted terrain, the bar's limitations were irrelevant. Its strengths were decisive. Private Wilson Watson carried a bar on Iwo Jima with the 3rd Marine Division. When his squad became pinned by a Japanese pillbox. Watson stood up. He walked toward the pillbox, firing his bar from the hip. Walking fire. The concept the weapon was originally designed for in World War I, advancing while maintaining suppressive fire. Watson killed over 60 Japanese soldiers that day. He survived. He received the Medal of Honor. The story became legend among Marines. But it wasn't unique. It was representative. Bar gunners did this repeatedly. They stood up when everyone else was pinned down. They advanced when everyone else couldn't move. They fired when everyone else was conserving ammunition, and they usually died doing it. 30 minutes, that was the average, but in those 30 minutes, they changed the tactical situation. They broke Japanese attacks, they enabled American advances, they made the difference. For Japanese infantry, the sound of the bar became associated with failure and death. Their doctrine emphasized closing with the enemy. The bar made closing impossible. Their tactics relied on night infiltration. The bar fired blind in darkness and still hit targets through sheer volume. Their training stressed courage over caution. The bar punished courage with mechanical precision. After the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, captured Japanese documents and prisoner interrogations revealed a shift in understanding. Junior officers were privately admitting that American firepower superiority was not temporary, not tactical, but systemic. They had better weapons distributed more generously at lower echelon levels. The disparity wasn't just in machine guns and artillery. It was in automatic rifles that individual squads carried as routine equipment. In August 1944, the Imperial Japanese Army issued a new tactical manual, Essentials of Island Defenses. The doctrine changed. No more beach defense against overwhelming American firepower, no more mass charges. Instead, defense in depth, concealed positions, mobile counterattacks from fortified strongpoints. The manual never explicitly mentioned the bar. It didn't need to. The new doctrine was an implicit admission that Japanese infantry could no longer close with American troops in the open. They needed cover, they needed fortifications, they needed to avoid situations where American automatic weapons could be brought to bear at close range. But even this adjustment couldn't change the fundamental math. On Iwo Jima, General Tadamichi Kuribayashi explicitly prohibited banzai charges. He called them a waste of manpower. He designed a defense based on tunnels, caves, interconnected bunkers, fight from cover, inflict maximum casualties, die in place rather than die charging. Yet even Kuribayashi's brilliant defense couldn't negate the bar. Marines clearing cave systems carried bars. The weapon's weight and bulk, problematic in open terrain, meant nothing in tunnels where everyone had to crouch anyway. The automatic fire suppressed cave mouths while flamethrower teams moved forward. The 20-round magazine, a limitation in sustained firefights, was perfect for clearing rooms and tunnels where engagements lasted seconds. When Japanese soldiers emerged from caves to counterattack, they ran into bar fire at ranges measured in yards, not meters. The cyclic rate at 550 rounds per minute meant a Japanese soldier covering 30 feet of ground took multiple rounds. Always multiple rounds. The bar didn't wound. It killed. The .30-06 round at close range caused catastrophic trauma. Medical officers on both sides knew. Bar wounds were almost always fatal. U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel John George, who fought through the Pacific Campaign, later wrote about Japanese automatic weapons. Nambu light machine guns caused me the greatest and most demoralizing fear I have known in all the combat I have seen. He explained that the high rate of fire meant being caught in a burst guaranteed multiple hits, but Japanese soldiers facing American automatic weapons felt this fear constantly. Every firefight, every patrol, every defensive position, the sound of multiple bars opening fire simultaneously was, Japanese survivors later said, the sound that told them they would not be going home. The psychological impact was cumulative. Early in the war, Japanese soldiers believed their training, discipline, and spirit gave them an advantage in close combat. By mid-war, that belief was eroding. By late war, it was gone. Captured diaries and post-war interrogations revealed a common theme. American firepower was overwhelming, impossible to overcome through courage alone, devastating at every range, and especially deadly at close quarters, where Japanese doctrine emphasized combat. The bar was only part of this firepower disparity. M1 Garand rifles were semi-automatic, while Japanese infantry carried bolt-action Arisakas. American machine guns were more numerous and often better positioned. American artillery was incomparably superior. American air support was dominant by 1943. But the BR was the weapon Japanese infantry encountered most frequently. It was the weapon they heard most often. It was the weapon that killed them at the ranges where they were supposed to have advantage. A Japanese infantry squad in 1944 typically carried one Type 99 light machine gun, 11 bolt-action rifles, and perhaps a Type 89 grenade discharger. Total automatic weapons. 1. Total sustained fire capability. One gunner who became an immediate priority target. If that gunner died, the squad's automatic firepower went to 0. An American Marine squad in 1944 carried 3 bars and 10 M1 Garands. Total automatic weapons. 3. Total sustained fire capability. 3 gunners, any one of whom could maintain squad firepower if the others fell. If a bar gunner died, his assistant gunner took the weapon. If the assistant fell, the next man in the fire team picked it up. The weapon never stopped firing until the fight ended. This redundancy was the real advantage. Not just more automatic weapons, but distributed automatic weapons. Multiple independent sources of suppressive fire. A Japanese squad's entire automatic firepower could be eliminated by killing 1 man. An American squad's automatic firepower required killing 3 men, spread across the formation, each with an assistant ready to take over. The tactical implications were profound. Japanese doctrine, built around infiltration and sudden close assault, required getting within grenade range, preferably bayonet range, before American forces could respond. But American squads, with 3 bars, could maintain suppressive fire from multiple positions simultaneously. Flanking 1 bar meant exposing yourself to another. Suppressing 1 bar meant 2 others were still firing. Getting close enough for bayonet range meant crossing a zone where 3 automatic weapons were firing 550 rounds per minute each. The mathematics were impossible, and Japanese soldiers knew it. They knew it as they prepared for attacks they understood were doomed. They knew it as they fixed bayonets for charges that would end with their deaths. They knew it as they heard the distinctive sound of bars opening fire and understood they would not survive the next 2 minutes. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The specific sound of the bar became encoded in Japanese military experience. Veterans who survived knew to identify American weapons by sound. The bar was distinctive, not the deeper, slower cadence of the Browning M1919 30 caliber machine gun, not the thunderous impact of the 50 caliber. The bar had a sharper, faster rhythm. 550 rounds per minute created a particular audio signature, ripping paper multiplied by violence, cloth tearing amplified to mechanical intensity. Japanese soldiers who heard it once and lived learned to recognize it instantly. Former Imperial Army infantryman Kichi Yoshida, captured on Okinawa, later described it in post-war interviews. When we heard that sound, we knew American infantry were very close. Not artillery, not airplanes. Infantry with automatic rifles. That sound meant we were about to be killed. The tactical adjustments Japanese forces made in response to American firepower revealed how deeply the problem ran. On Peleliu, in September 1944, Colonel Kunio Nakagawa abandoned traditional Japanese tactics completely. No beach defense, no banzai charges. Instead, he created a fortress in the Umabrogel Mountains, interconnected caves, prepared fighting positions, interlocking fields of fire. The goal was attrition, not victory. Kill as many Marines as possible before being killed yourself. The Umabrogel defense was brilliantly conceived and brutally executed. Marines took 80% casualties in some units fighting through those ridges, but even Nakagawa's fortress couldn't negate the bar. Marines developed tactics specifically for cave warfare. Flamethrower tanks approached cave mouths, while bar gunners suppressed openings. The bar's 20-round magazine, awkward in open combat, was perfect for this work. Fire-controlled bursts keep defenders' heads down, enable the flamethrower team to get close enough to pump fire into the cave. Reload. Repeat. The Marines learned that caves full of Japanese soldiers didn't surrender when hit with flamethrowers. They came out fighting. They emerged burning, still carrying weapons, still trying to kill before they died. That's when the bar was decisive. Burning men, charging from caves, were cut down by automatic fire before they could close. The weapon stopped suicidal courage through mechanical rate of fire. 550 rounds per minute meant burning soldiers took multiple hits before they traveled 10 feet. There was no fighting through the pain. There was only dying. Technical Sergeant John Basilone, who had carried a bar on Guadalcanal before transitioning to machine guns, understood the weapon's psychological effect. He later said in a training film, "The bar is the backbone of the rifle squad. When that bar opens up, the enemy knows they're in a fight. When multiple bars open up, the enemy knows they're going to lose." Basilone died on Iwo Jima in February 1945, killed by a mortar round while leading his machine gun section. But his assessment of the bar's role was accurate. It was the backbone of the squad because it provided firepower that Japanese soldiers couldn't match and couldn't overcome. When Marines advanced under fire, the bar gunners put suppressive fire on enemy positions. When Marines retreated under pressure, the bar gunners covered the withdrawal. When positions came under attack, the bar gunners broke the assault. The weapon's placement within the fireteam structure maximized its effectiveness. Each Marine rifle squad was organized into 3 fire teams of 4 men. The team leader carried an M1 Garand and led the team. The bar gunner carried the automatic rifle. The assistant bar gunner carried an M1 Garand and 6 extra bar magazines in specialized pouches. The 4th man carried an M1 Garand and additional ammunition for the bar. This organization meant the fire team was built around the bar. The entire team existed to support and protect the automatic weapon. In combat, the team leader identified targets. The bar gunner suppressed them. The rifleman protected the flanks and killed targets the bar missed. If the bar gunner fell, the assistant immediately picked up the weapon. The team never lost its automatic firepower unless everyone died. Japanese infantry organization didn't match this structure. Their light machine gun was a section weapon, controlled at squad level. If the gunner died, there wasn't an immediate replacement trained and positioned to take over. The weapon might be recovered later, or it might be lost. Either way, the squad's automatic firepower was interrupted, often permanently. American fire teams never experienced this interruption. The BR stayed in action until the fight ended. The cumulative effect of these organizational and equipment differences was devastating. In any firefight between a Japanese squad and an American squad, the Americans had more automatic weapons, faster-firing rifles, and more ammunition. The Japanese had discipline, courage, and a willingness to die. Discipline and courage don't win firefights against suppressive automatic fire from multiple positions. They just mean you die bravely instead of dying while running away. By late 1944, Japanese tactical manuals were explicitly telling soldiers to avoid close combat with American infantry, avoid direct firefights, use concealment, strike from ambush, withdraw immediately, never become decisively engaged at close range. This was a complete reversal of pre-war doctrine. The army that had built its reputation on aggressive close combat was now instructing soldiers to avoid the very situations their training emphasized. The reversal came too late. Most Japanese soldiers in the Pacific had already learned these lessons the hard way. They had learned them on Guadalcanal, where bayonet charges ran into bar fire and dissolved. They had learned them on Tenaru, where Marines came ashore with multiple bars per squad, and Japanese defenders couldn't stop them, despite perfect defensive positions. They had learned them on Saipan, where the largest banzai charge of the war accomplished nothing except killing 4,000 Japanese soldiers in a single night. Sergeant Clarence Colson crossed Omaha Beach on D-Day, firing his BR from the hip. The technique was called walking fire, dating back to World War I when the bar was designed. The idea was simple: advance while maintaining suppressive fire. Don't aim precisely. Fire continuously while moving forward. The volume of fire keeps enemy heads down. The forward movement closes the range. Eventually, you're close enough to kill everything that hasn't retreated. Walking fire was extremely difficult. The bar weighed 20 pounds. Firing it from the hip while moving required strength, balance, and control. The recoil was substantial. Accuracy was poor. But Colson made it work because the tactical situation demanded it. His assistant gunner struggled to keep him supplied with magazines. The sustained fire Colson maintained broke the German defensive line he was advancing through. Marines in the Pacific adopted walking fire as standard bar technique in certain situations: when clearing bunkers, when assaulting pillboxes, when advancing through jungle where aimed fire was impossible anyway because you couldn't see targets clearly. The bar became a psychological weapon in these moments. The sound of automatic fire from an advancing soldier broke enemy morale. You can defend against aimed shots from cover. You can't defend against an advancing stream of bullets. You can only retreat or die. Japanese soldiers facing walking fire experienced the ultimate tactical nightmare. Their doctrine said close with the enemy. The enemy was closing with them while firing automatically. Their training said fight hand-to-hand. The hand-to-hand fighter was cut down before reaching hand-to-hand range. Their courage said stand and fight. Standing meant dying before you fired a shot. Private First Class Eugene Sledge, who served with the 1st Marine Division on Peleliu and Okinawa, wrote about bar gunners with something approaching reverence. Our bar men were the bravest people I ever saw. They stood up when everybody else stayed down. They walked forward when everybody else stayed put. And they died, most of them. But while they lived, they saved the rest of us. The mortality rate among BR gunners was shocking even by Pacific War standards. The weapon made you a priority target. Japanese soldiers learned to identify bar gunners by silhouette. The longer weapon, the bipod, if attached, the stance. If you could kill the bar gunner, you eliminated the squad's primary source of automatic fire, so Japanese snipers targeted them, Japanese infiltrators targeted them, Japanese machine gunners targeted them. Every enemy soldier who could identify a bar gunner tried to kill him first. This made being a bar gunner psychologically brutal. You knew you were the primary target. You knew your life expectancy was measured in minutes once combat started. You knew the weapon you carried made you critical to your squad's survival. And simultaneously, painted a target on your chest. You carried it anyway. You fired it anyway. You stood up when everyone else stayed down. You walked forward when everyone else stayed put. And you probably died doing it. But the Marines kept finding volunteers. Men stepped forward to carry the bar, even knowing the statistics, even knowing most bar gunners didn't survive their first serious engagement. They volunteered because the weapon mattered, because squads with good bar gunners lived through fights that killed squads with poor bar gunners, because the 20 pounds of steel and walnut and mechanism meant the difference between surviving and dying for 12 other men. The Japanese never developed an effective counter to this weapon. They couldn't copy it. Japanese industry couldn't manufacture bars in useful quantities. They couldn't match it. The closest equivalent, Japanese weapon, the Type 99, was heavier, more complex, and distributed in smaller numbers. They couldn't avoid it. Every American patrol, every American defensive position, every American assault had multiple bars. So they adapted the only way possible. They changed doctrine. They abandoned the tactics that made them famous. They stopped emphasizing close combat because close combat against an enemy with 3 automatic rifles per squad was suicide. They stopped conducting banzai charges because charging into bar fire killed everyone without accomplishing anything. They stopped infiltration tactics because infiltrators who encountered bar gunners died before raising an alarm. By Okinawa, Japanese defensive doctrine had evolved into defense in depth from fortified positions with no massed counterattacks. In other words, dig in, hide, shoot from cover, and die in place. Never expose yourself to American firepower in the open. Never give American automatic weapons clear targets. Never, ever charge American positions. This was sensible. It extended the defense. It maximized American casualties. It made sense from every logical perspective. But it was also an admission of defeat. The army that conquered half of Asia in 6 months had been reduced to hiding in holes, hoping to kill a few Americans before dying themselves. The psychological transformation was complete. The weapons Americans carried, particularly the BR at squad level, had broken Japanese offensive doctrine entirely. Lieutenant Commander Robert Winston, flying from the USS Lexington during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, described attacking Japanese aircraft. They came in steady and straight as if on a training exercise. They didn't take evasive action. They didn't break formation when attacked. They simply flew forward while American fighters tore through them. Ground combat on Pacific Islands followed the same pattern by late war. Japanese soldiers advanced steady and straight, following doctrine, executing textbook tactics, and dying in neat rows because American automatic weapons didn't care about courage or discipline or training. They simply fired 550 rounds per minute until nothing moved. The bar wasn't the only weapon that contributed to this outcome. The M1 Garand's semi-automatic fire gave American riflemen 3 times the sustained fire rate of Japanese bolt-action rifles. American artillery vastly outweighed Japanese guns in number and capability. American aircraft dominated the Pacific by mid-war. American logistics ensured ammunition never ran short. The entire system was designed to generate overwhelming firepower at every level. But the BR was the weapon Japanese infantry saw most frequently. It was the weapon they faced in firefights. It was the weapon that killed them at ranges where their doctrine said they should have advantage. It was the physical manifestation of American industrial might, distributed so freely that every Marine squad had 3 of them. 3 automatic rifles per squad. The Japanese military mind couldn't quite process the abundance. 1 automatic weapon per squad was normal. 3 was excess, bordering on absurdity. Except that excess meant Japanese soldiers died 3 times as fast. Captured Japanese field manuals from late 1944 included specific guidance on identifying and engaging BR gunners. The automatic rifle soldier can be identified by weapon length and stance. This soldier must be killed first. Concentrate all fire on automatic rifle soldier before engaging other targets. If automatic rifle soldier is not killed immediately, withdraw and re-attack from different position. The manual acknowledged reality. You couldn't fight aim through bar fire. You could only kill the gunner before he killed you, or retreat and try again from somewhere else. This was fundamentally different from pre-war doctrine that emphasized fighting through enemy fire, through sheer determination. The bar had taught Japanese soldiers that determination doesn't stop bullets traveling 2,800 feet per second. The weapon also generated specific tactical responses in Marine units. Commanders learned that concentrating bar fire was devastatingly effective. When assaulting a position, have all 3 bar gunners in the squad fire on the same target simultaneously. 1,650 rounds per minute focused on a single pillbox or bunker. The volume of fire was so intense that it kept defenders from returning fire, disabled weapons, and often caused structural collapse of fortifications. Marines also learned that bar fire could suppress entire formations. 1 bar, properly positioned with good visibility and adequate ammunition, could keep a Japanese company pinned down, not killed necessarily. Automatic rifle fire at long range wasn't particularly accurate, but suppressed, heads down, unable to move, unable to organize, unable to execute tactical maneuvers because attempting to move meant taking automatic fire. This was the true tactical revolution the bar represented. Previously, automatic weapons were too heavy for individual infantrymen to position effectively. Machine guns needed tripods, crews, complex logistics. They were powerful, but inflexible. The bar was powerful and flexible. One man could carry it anywhere infantry could go. He could fire it from any position infantry occupied. He could displace it instantly when the tactical situation changed. This flexibility meant American infantry could bring automatic fire to bear in situations where previous armies couldn't. Jungle patrols had automatic weapons at point and rear. Cave-clearing teams had automatic weapons throughout the formation. Beach assaults had automatic weapons in the first wave. Every tactical situation, no matter how fluid or chaotic, included multiple automatic weapons because the bar was light enough to go anywhere riflemen went. Japanese infantry never achieved this flexibility. Their automatic weapons were either too heavy for one man to carry effectively or too lightly distributed to achieve concentration. They had good, crew-served machine guns. They had adequate light machine guns, but they didn't have automatic rifles distributed 3 per squad to every frontline unit. They couldn't match American flexibility because they couldn't match American industrial production. By 1945, the firepower disparity had become psychological oppression. Japanese soldiers knew before contact that they would be outgunned. They knew American squads had more automatic weapons. They knew American ammunition supply was effectively unlimited. They knew their courage and training couldn't overcome this material advantage. They fought anyway because their culture and their orders demanded it. But they fought without hope of victory. They fought to die well, not to win. The diary of probational officer Toshihiro Ura, found on New Georgia after his death, revealed this psychological state explicitly. "We are positively fighting to win, but we have no weapons. We stand with rifles and bayonets to meet the enemy's aircraft, battleships, and medium artillery. The Japanese army is still depending on the hand-to-hand fighting of the Meiji era, while the enemy is using highly developed scientific weapons." Ura understood. Many Japanese officers understood. But understanding didn't provide solutions. Japan's industrial base couldn't suddenly produce automatic weapons in American quantities. Japanese tactical doctrine couldn't suddenly adapt to fighting an enemy with systematic firepower superiority at every level. Japanese soldiers couldn't suddenly overcome the mathematics of 3 automatic rifles per squad versus 1 automatic rifle per squad. So they died. They died in banzai charges that accomplished nothing. They died in infiltration attacks that ran into bar fire. They died defending positions that American firepower reduced to rubble. They died knowing they would die, executing tactics they knew were futile, following doctrine they understood was obsolete, fighting a war their country was losing because, ultimately, courage and discipline don't defeat industrial capacity. The Battle of Saipan in June and July 1944 included the largest banzai charge of the Pacific War. General Yoshitsugu Saito gathered 4,300 soldiers, many wounded, some without weapons, and ordered a final assault on American lines. July 7th, 1944. The charge hit the Army's 1st and 2nd Battalions of the 105th Infantry Regiment. 15 hours of continuous combat. Japanese soldiers came in waves, screaming, bayonets fixed, many armed only with bamboo spears or grenades. They achieved surprise, initially. They broke through the first American positions. They created chaos and terror. Then the bars started firing. Not just a few. Dozens. Every squad had 3. The concentrated automatic fire cut through Japanese formations like industrial machinery. Men fell in groups. The charge lost momentum. It stalled. It broke. By morning, approximately 4,000 Japanese soldiers were dead. American casualties, almost 1,000 killed and wounded, mostly in the initial breakthrough, before automatic weapons fire became fully effective. The math was brutal. 4,000 Japanese dead to cause 1,000 American casualties. That's a 4-to-1 exchange ratio. In the attack, where the attacker traditionally has advantage, the defenders were outnumbered initially, surprised, and fighting from hasty positions. Yet, American firepower, particularly automatic weapons at squad level, turned what should have been a desperate defense into a slaughter. Post-battle analysis by American intelligence officers concluded that Japanese forces could have inflicted significantly more casualties through distributed attacks from fortified positions. The mass charge, while psychologically intimidating, concentrated Japanese forces into areas where American automatic weapons could achieve maximum effectiveness. In other words, Japanese courage and offensive spirit played directly into American material advantages. The Banzai charge, once a tactical triumph, had become tactical suicide. But the charge continued, not because Japanese commanders were stupid or ignorant, because their options were limited. Distributed defense from fortifications required ammunition, supplies, and time to prepare. Japanese forces on Saipan had little ammunition, limited supplies, and no time. The massed charge was desperate, but desperation was the only option available. Better to die attacking than to starve in caves while waiting for a relief force that would never come. Still, the decision to order the charge revealed how completely Japanese offensive doctrine had collapsed. Pre-war tactical theory emphasized surprise, infiltration, and exploitation of enemy weakness. The Saipan charge was none of these things. It was a frontal assault against prepared positions in daylight. It ignored every principle of successful offensive operations. It succeeded only in killing thousands of Japanese soldiers in exchange for temporary disruption of American positions. The charge confirmed what many Japanese officers already knew. American firepower, especially automatic weapons at squad level, had made traditional Japanese infantry tactics obsolete. But confirming a problem doesn't solve it. Japan couldn't suddenly produce thousands of automatic rifles. Japanese soldiers couldn't suddenly learn new tactics in the middle of a losing war. The institutional knowledge, training, and equipment that made Japanese infantry effective in China and early Pacific operations was now a liability. But it was the only thing they had. The grinding attrition warfare of Peleliu and Okinawa represented Japan's attempt to adapt fortified defense, interlocking positions, depth rather than beach defense, slow American progress, inflict maximum casualties, hope that American public opinion would turn against the war before Japan was completely destroyed. It was realistic strategy, given Japan's situation. It maximized American casualties while recognizing that Japanese victory was impossible. But even this adaptation couldn't overcome the bar. Marines fighting through Okinawa's fortified zones brought bars into every assault. The weapon cleared bunkers. It suppressed cave mouths. It broke up counterattacks. It killed Japanese soldiers who emerged to resist. The tactic changed. Instead of charging across open ground, Marines advanced from cover to cover, but the weapon stayed the same. Still 20 pounds. Still 550 rounds per minute. Still decisively effective at close range. The cumulative psychological toll on Japanese soldiers was immense. Captured diaries from Okinawa revealed men who knew they were going to die, who understood their defense would fail, who recognized American material superiority was insurmountable, yet who continued fighting because duty required it. They fought without hope. They fought without belief in victory. They fought because surrender was culturally unacceptable and retreat was militarily impossible. One captured diary fragment read, "The Americans have 3 automatic rifles in every patrol. We have 1 in every squad if we are lucky. How can we defeat an enemy who wastes such wealth on common infantry? They fire more bullets in one engagement than we have for an entire campaign." The word waste is revealing. To Japanese soldiers raised in resource-scarce Japan, trained to conserve every round, taught that ammunition discipline was a military virtue, American ammunition expenditure seemed like wasteful excess. But it wasn't waste. It was abundance. It was industrial capacity deployed at tactical level. It was the translation of American factory production into battlefield effectiveness. The BR embodied this abundance. 3 per squad meant American commanders could afford to let barmen fire sustained bursts, could afford to use automatic weapons for suppression rather than precision, could afford to expend thousands of rounds in a single firefight because thousands more would arrive tomorrow. This wasn't wasteful. It was warfare conducted by an industrial power with resources to spare. Japan fought the war under opposite constraints. Every bullet mattered because industrial capacity couldn't replace expended ammunition quickly. Every automatic weapon mattered because factories couldn't build replacements. Every soldier mattered because the manpower pool was finite and shrinking. Japanese tactical doctrine emphasized conservation because material scarcity demanded it. American tactical doctrine emphasized expenditure because material abundance permitted it. The BR demonstrated this philosophical divide at squad level. An American fire team could fire hundreds of rounds in a brief engagement and expect to be resupplied within hours. A Japanese squad firing hundreds of rounds might not be resupplied for days or weeks, if ever. So American squads fired whenever tactical situations justified it. Japanese squads conserved ammunition for critical moments. The psychological difference was enormous. American soldiers knew they had support. More ammunition would arrive. More weapons would replace losses. More men would fill gaps. This knowledge bred tactical aggression. You could take risks because the system supported risk-taking. You could expend resources freely because the system replaced resources routinely. Japanese soldiers knew they had no support. Ammunition expended today might not be replaced tomorrow. Weapons lost were probably gone forever. Men killed left permanent gaps in formations. This knowledge bred tactical conservatism. You couldn't take risks because losses were irreplaceable. You couldn't expend resources freely because resupply was uncertain. The BR, issued 3 per squad to every Marine rifle unit, was the physical manifestation of American abundance. Japanese soldiers saw American troops using automatic rifles for tasks that Japanese doctrine reserved for crew-served machine guns, suppressing areas rather than specific targets, firing sustained bursts rather than controlled shots, advancing while firing rather than firing, then advancing. The tactical flexibility this provided was incomprehensible to soldiers trained under resource constraints. After the war, American occupation forces interviewed surviving Japanese officers extensively. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey sought to understand Japanese strategic and tactical decision-making. The interviews revealed a consistent theme. Japanese military leadership had understood American industrial superiority theoretically, but failed to grasp the tactical implications practically. They knew America produced more weapons. They knew American logistics was superior. They knew American ammunition supply was abundant, but they didn't understand how this translated to battlefield effectiveness. They didn't understand that industrial capacity meant every American squad had 3 automatic rifles. They didn't understand that logistical superiority meant those rifles never lacked ammunition. They didn't understand that material abundance enabled tactical doctrines impossible for resource-poor militaries. One former Japanese battalion commander, when asked about American infantry weapons, paused for a long time before answering. "We knew they had more. We didn't know they had so many more. We didn't know they would use them so freely. We didn't know our soldiers would face automatic fire in every engagement, at every range, in every tactical situation. We prepared to fight an army. We encountered an industrial machine that killed with mechanical precision." He was describing the bar without naming it specifically, but the weapon he meant was clear. 3 per squad, 20 pounds each, 550 rounds per minute, 30.06 Springfield cartridge, distributed so freely that Japanese soldiers encountered them constantly, used so liberally that automatic fire became the standard American response to any tactical situation. The weapon's legacy extended far beyond World War II. The bar saw service in Korea. It fought in Vietnam. It remained in American armories into the 1970s. South Korean forces used it. Philippine forces used it. Various armies worldwide adopted it. The weapon that terrified Japanese infantry in 1943 remained in service 30 years later because the tactical problem it solved, how to provide reliable automatic fire at squad level, remained relevant. But the bar's most important impact was psychological. It changed how Japanese soldiers thought about American infantry. Pre-war, Japanese military intelligence assessed American soldiers as poorly trained, poorly motivated, and unlikely to fight effectively. The Marines who landed on Guadalcanal in August 1942 destroyed these assessments permanently. The BRs those Marines carried demonstrated that American infantry had systematic advantages in firepower that Japanese courage couldn't overcome. The sound of the bar became associated with American presence. Japanese patrols heard it and knew American troops were near. Japanese defensive positions heard it and knew an assault was beginning. Japanese infiltrators heard it and knew they'd been discovered. The distinctive, ripping noise of automatic fire at 550 rounds per minute was the audio signature of American infantry in the Pacific, and for Japanese soldiers it was the sound of death, not abstract death, not heroic death in service of the emperor, mechanical death, industrial death, death delivered at 2,800 feet per second by soldiers who had unlimited ammunition and orders to fire whenever tactical situations justified it, death that came in long bursts rather than aimed shots, death that didn't discriminate between brave soldiers and cowards, between officers and enlisted, between veteran troops and green replacements. The bar killed them all equally, with mechanical precision, with industrial efficiency, with American abundance, 20 rounds at a time, 550 rounds per minute, 3 per squad, every engagement, every island. In the end, the bar represented something larger than itself. It represented American industrial capacity deployed at tactical level. It represented the translation of factory production into battlefield effectiveness. It represented the material abundance that enabled tactical doctrines impossible for resource-poor nations. And for Japanese soldiers trained to believe that spirit could overcome material, that courage could defeat firepower, that Bushido could triumph over technology. The bar was the mechanical refutation of everything they'd been taught to believe. The sergeant on Bougainville, who cut down 8 Japanese soldiers with a single burst, understood this. He didn't think about industrial capacity or tactical doctrine. He thought about keeping his men alive. The BR let him do that. 20 pounds of weapon that fired 550 rounds per minute and killed Japanese soldiers before they could close to bayonet range. That was all that mattered. That was what winning looked like at squad level. The Japanese soldiers who died in that wire at Bougainville understood it differently. In the seconds between the Bangalore torpedo exploding and the bar firing, they believed courage and determination would carry them through. They believed their training was superior. They believed their willingness to die gave them tactical advantage. Then the bar opened fire, and in the 2 seconds it took to empty a 20-round magazine at 550 rounds per minute, 8 men died, and Japanese offensive doctrine died with them. That sound, the distinctive tearing rip of automatic fire, echoed across every Pacific battlefield. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, dozens of smaller islands whose names most Americans don't know. The bar was there, 3 per squad, always firing, always killing, always the mechanical answer to courage and determination and suicidal bravery. Japanese soldiers were terrified when bar gunners fired 550 rounds per minute at point-blank range. Not because they lacked courage. They had courage in abundance. Not because they weren't well trained. Their training was excellent. Not because they didn't understand tactics. Their tactical knowledge was sophisticated. They were terrified because they understood that courage and training and tactical knowledge meant nothing against automatic weapons fire. They were terrified because they understood they were going to die and their death would accomplish nothing. They were terrified because they understood that no amount of spiritual power could stop 30.06 rounds traveling at 2,800 feet per second. And they were right to be terrified, because the mathematics were inexorable. 3 bars per American squad, 1 Type 99 per Japanese squad, if they were lucky. 550 rounds per minute versus 800 rounds per minute. But 3 American weapons versus 1 Japanese weapon. The firepower advantage was overwhelming. And Japanese soldiers died in overwhelming numbers because courage doesn't stop bullets, and determination doesn't defeat industrial capacity, and Bushido doesn't overcome material abundance. The bar taught them this lesson. One burst at a time, 550 rounds per minute, point-blank range, the last sound many Japanese soldiers heard. The weapon they learned to fear more than any other. The mechanical killer that broke Japanese offensive doctrine and broke Japanese soldiers and ultimately broke any illusion that spirit could triumph over material. 20 pounds of American steel and walnut and mechanism. 3 per squad. Every island, every battle, until the war ended and the dying stopped and Japanese survivors could finally admit what they'd learned through terrible experience. When bar gunners opened fire at close range, you didn't fight through it. You didn't overcome it through courage. You didn't survive it through determination. You simply died. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.